My name is Helen Z. Pearl. I have the pleasure today of interviewing Jeanette Carrozzella. Today is October 10th, 2007. I'm conducting this interview as part of the Connecticut Bar Foundation James W. Cooper Fellows Oral History of Connecticut Women in the Legal Profession project. This project is sponsored by the Connecticut Bar Foundation. So, Jeanette, would you please state your full name?
Good morning, Helen. My full name is Jeanette Tortorisi Carrozzella.
And what is your date of birth and your place of birth?
Okay, I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, and my date of birth is November 30th, 1930.
So now that we know who you are, we'd like to know a little bit about your background. Would you tell us about your parents and what their occupations, if any, were?
Okay, my parents were George and Ida Tortorisi. They were both Italian immigrants who came to this country in the early 20th century. And my father was a printer. He owned his printing business, and my mother worked in a dress factory as a dressmaker. And
did you have any siblings?
Yes, I had an older sister, Rosalie.
And how many years older than you were?
She's 9 years older than I am.
And did your sister become employed?
My sister ended up going to Cornell and to the Yale School of Nursing, and she got her master's in nursing, married, and then retired. And that's what girls did in those days. And
did you have any, or do you have any family members in the law?
I have one son who is a practicing attorney, Chris Carrozzella. He's in Wallingford.
But at the time you decided to go to law, you didn't have any relatives?
No relatives in the law at all.
And so what was your early interest in the law, if any?
Probably not very much in my early years. I think it came about as a young adult when I was deciding what I should do, and by elimination, going to law school and then doing something with my degree afterward was a consideration. It was very subtle. I did not come from the wound yearning to be an attorney. It happened much later.
What type of a neighborhood did you grow up in? And where was it?
I grew up in Hartford, and I lived what we call below or behind the rock, which is right below Trinity College. Sort of a very middle-class neighborhood.
And did you go to public high school or private high school?
Yeah, I went to public schools, and I went to Hartford Public High, HPHS.
Did you have any particular role models when you were in high school?
Not particularly. At some point I had met Alice Leopold, who at that time, when I was about 15 or 16, was Secretary of the State. My father had a little bit of interest in access to political activities, and I had met Mrs. Leopold, and she very kindly invited me to come up to the state capitol to visit her one day, and I think that sort of piqued my interest in government and politics, and so early on, even though I didn't know it, she probably moved me in that direction.
As to college, where did you attend?
I went to Wheaton in Norton, Massachusetts, a small girls' school, which I guess the guidance counselors at Hartford High thought would be suitable for me.
And what did you study there? What was your
my major was government and history. My minor was art history, and it was, I think, a very good background for someone to have. I enjoyed being at Wheaton. It was a fine liberal arts school.
And so what determined your choice of career at the time that you were finishing college?
At the time I was finishing college, of course, most girls had hoped to be engaged and on their way to marriage back in my day. I was through at Wheaton, or graduated from Wheaton in 1952, and usually you went on to marriage after that, but that hadn't happened to me, so what to do, and I thought I would continue my schooling. That would buy me more time, and I was a decent student, and it seemed like a good thing to do. My parents had no objection.
So where did you apply?
Initially, I applied to the University of Connecticut School of Law, and I was accepted. But as the summer went on, I developed cold feet. Now, this is 1952, 1953 or so, and not too many women were being involved in this sort of activity. So I decided to do what my sister had done, which was to attend the Yale School of Nursing and get a master's degree in nursing. I did apply. I did spend 1 year there. I did not like it, and I applied to the law school once again. And again, I was accepted, and that's how I got to law school.
What was it that you didn't like about nursing that you thought would not be an issue in law?
There were two things about nursing that I realized being in it I didn't like at all. I was not thrilled about studying the biological sciences. I did reasonably well at them, but it was not my cup of tea. The other thing that I really didn't like was that they practiced that old school type of nursing, sort of a Florence Nightingale style, where the nurse is rather, I'm sure they would use a word different from subservient, but very superfluous or ancillary to the doctor's role. So I found myself at times, you would go what they call grand rounds, and there would be the doctors and the residents and the medical students and the nurses trailing along at the very end. For some reason, I remember that very, very specially. I knew that I would not function in that role in any way in my life. Subtly, I found it demeaning. So not being terribly interested in subject matter and not liking the aura that existed in nursing, I decided to leave, and I applied again to the law school, and I was accepted once again. In those years, the law school was an old mansion on Woodland Street, a very charming place, very lovely
And that's
place.
in Hartford?
That's in Hartford and on Woodland Street. And I remember during my interview with Mr. Archibald, his asking me if I were interested in attending law school because I wanted to find a husband for myself.
That's obviously a question he didn't ask of men that were applying.
You're right, I'm sure he did not. I forget exactly what my answer was. I might have suggested that he and I compromise on that, because I did finish law school, I did pass the bar.
And you did find a husband.
And I did find a husband. In fact, I married at the end of my second year of law school. So that was...
So what were the years that you were at UConn Law School?
I got out of Wheaton in 1952. I delayed, spent that 1 year, so it had to be 53 to 56. I was graduated in 1956.
And why did you choose the University of Hartford, University of Connecticut Law School?
Because I had gone away to school. I lived in Massachusetts when I was in college, and the law school was not too many blocks away from where my family lived in West Hartford then. So it was local and it was affordable, and I wanted to continue with school. It seemed to fit the bill.
And you decided to go to law school, then why after leaving the nursing?
I wanted to, after my experiences at the nursing school, I knew that I wanted to be what I called a more important woman. And I thought being a woman lawyer at the time would do that for me. And that, coupled with my enjoyment of history, government, literature, words, for that reason it seemed to be an all right decision. I did consult with my government professor at Wheaton, Mr. Miller, asked him if he thought that I had the capacity to get through law school. And he told me he thought if I studied hard that I probably could do it. So
he obviously was right.
Well,
what did your parents and your family think about your going to law school?
They were very supportive. I had immigrant parents who felt strongly that the way to rise and live life nicely was to become educated. And even though they only had 2 daughters, my sister went to Cornell and Yale and has a master's in nursing, and I went to Wheaton and UConn Law and have my law degree. So it was very important to my family that we be educated. They were very supportive.
You only had the sister, so there were no sons that they were invested in educating instead of daughters.
That's right.
I mean, you think that might have made a difference?
Not to them. They ended up with 2 girls, and education was more important than the gender of their children. I know my dad would have probably liked to have a son because he always encouraged me in sort of boy-type pursuits. I always wanted to be a Northwest Mounted policeman or a commercial airline pilot when I was young. Never.
So you weren't really into the traditional women's roles professionally. Yeah. How many women were in your law school class?
I was the only woman in my class, and Shirley Racy Beisowitz was the only other woman in the class, and she was in the last year. Shirley and I became very close friends.
Well, was she in your class, or she just was in law school at the same time?
She was in law school. She was in the 3rd year when I entered law school.
Oh, I see. So you were the only 2 women at law school at the same time?
We were the only 2 women in the day school during those years, yes, at least when I entered.
Did you later find out that there was another woman?
By coincidence, and I think it's sort of funny, I always brag that I was the only woman in my class. And when we were preparing for our 50th law school class reunion, and I was helping some of the girls at the law school just a little bit to put our reunion together, I found out that there was another woman who was in the night school who had graduated the same year as I. So it was 50 years before I realized that I did not have the esteemed position of being the only woman in my graduating class.
Well, obviously there were no other women in your classes, though, in the actual class.
In the day school, I know there were no other women in my class, right.
Did you enjoy law school?
I enjoyed it very much. I had gone to a girls' college. Wheaton at that time had not gone co-ed. I loved the study of law. I enjoyed that immensely. I think being the sole female in the class added to my enjoyment of being in law school.
What was the reaction of your male classmates?
They were very nice. Since I was the only one around, they treated me like one of the boys in Marilyn Monroe. It was a nice position to hold.
It's an interesting combination, the way you put that.
Well, I think having gone to a girls' school, which I, frankly, today am rather in favor of, I think they have great value and they have their merits, but I always felt my reward was that I had a few husbands, 4 sons and 4 grandsons, and that was my reward for and being the only woman in the class was my reward for having attended Wheaton.
Did you have any women professors?
No. I did have Ethel Sorokin, who had recently graduated, was an advisor of mine. She was in practice with her husband, Milton Sorokin and Sorokin, and she was my advisor when I was on the board of student editors. So, but she did not teach at the law school, so there were no women faculty at the time.
How did your male professors treat you?
They were very gentlemanly. And I'm wondering today if the women today would consider that they were condescending, but I didn't know any better if that would be the case. And they're very courteous and very gentlemanly, and they treated me very nicely.
What do you think the most important thing was that you learned in law school?
That's such a... So many things.
Well, then
yes,
some of the most important things.
I always think legal thinking is something that I think I learned. I wish a lot of other lawyers had learned legal thinking, which is how to think in a straight line and be reasonable, and also to be able to see both points of view and be reasonable in whichever side you choose to espouse.
And do you recall what courses particularly that you took?
Back in those days, there were very few electives, so the basic bread and butter courses. It was a small law school in those years. Small faculty, so I'm sure that the curriculum today is much more expansive. But I took the contracts, constitutional law, real property, personal property, be it bills and notes, torts, exactly, bankruptcy, and I remember future interests, which I thought ought to be in a mathematics course rather than in a law school. That was one of the low points, or the low point in my law school studies.
I'm sure you have lots of company in that. Let's turn our attention to the bar admission. When did you take the bar exam and where was it?
I took it in 1956. I was admitted in New Haven at the Superior Court in New Haven.
And what was your experience with the bar?
The bar exam, you mean? I think it's a universal experience. I think I was terrified. I think that's sort of common.
When we talked about this in preparation for this interview, you told me a story about taking the exam and your condition and what happened to you.
Well, I will always remember of course it was a two-day exam, but I remember one of the days, I will never forget that particular time in my life. I was 6 months pregnant with my first child when I was taking that bar exam, and one of my husband's friends during the intermission very graciously came over with a cup of coffee, which he had gotten for me. And as he approached me, sort of stumbled and tripped, and the cup of coffee went all down my back. So the thing I remember about taking the bar exam is I remember being in New Haven in the Yale Law School where the exam was being given, sitting there absolutely drenched and uncomfortable for 1,000 reasons, because I had wet coffee running down my underwear. So.
By the way, did you take a bar review course? Or
yes, I did.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
I did. I wasn't sure how long ago they had those available. Yeah. Did you know any women attorneys before you went to law school?
No, I don't think so. I don't recall. There were not too many. I did not personally know any.
How many women attorneys were sworn in at the same time you were?
If there were others, I really don't remember. I'm sad to say I probably don't remember the day, since it was probably being done county-wise. There might have been others, but I don't remember.
You didn't notice anyone else?
I really don't remember. I don't.
So what job opportunities were available to you after you became a lawyer?
Well, of course, I had married at the end of my second year of law school, and as I just related, I was expecting my first child. I was 6 months pregnant when I was taking the bar exam. So I felt I had a job opportunity, which I had already accepted, which was to be a wife and mother. My husband, Jack, was in the service. He graduated a year ahead of me from law school.
You mean the military service?
He was in the military service, and he was stationed in Philadelphia, so that when I graduated from law school, I joined him in Philadelphia, and we spent a year and a half there. And that's where my son Johnny was born. So I really had no particular intentions to go out and find a job or be employed at that time.
All right, so how long was it before you had your first legal position?
Well, when we came back to Wallingford, Connecticut, where Jack and I lived, Jack was putting together a partnership or talking to other people, other lawyers in town about forming partnerships. And I remember his talking to Joe Delaney, I think may still be in Wallingford today, and Joe, whom I knew and liked very much and still do, said to Jack, well, you know, Jack, if we form a partnership, we want you to know we don't expect your wife is not going to be asked to join this firm. And so at this point, I kind of read the scene, and I thought, well, that's okay. I certainly understand, because if a woman joins that law firm, they're not going to have any clients. And I don't want that to happen, because I want to be able to have a roof over my head and feed myself and my children. I accepted this as, I did not take this as an offense at all. My husband, Jack, thereafter went into politics. And as a result of the election in which he was successful, the appointments on the local town court became available in the Wallingford Town Court. And Joe Delaney, who didn't want me in his office.
He wanted to find another job for you to keep you out of the office.
Probably. Well, became the judge, was appointed the judge, and I think Charlie Wood was the deputy judge. And there was a prosecutor, and they asked me if I would be willing to be the clerk of the court. And by this time, I had 2 little boys and had enough, I could spend enough time at home, and I thought this was a wonderful opportunity.
So about how long was this after law school?
I was admitted to the bar in 1956, and that's when I finished law school. And this was July 1958 that I became clerk of the town court.
So it's less than 2 years from the time you passed the bar.
Right.
Okay.
But time for me to have a second child.
Okay, so you became clerk of the Wallingford Town Court.
Right.
And what were your responsibilities in that position?
Well, like any clerk of the court, it's the you're the chief executive officer of the court. This, of course, is a very small operation. So I was the chief clerical person, chief telephone operator, and I guess the Jane of all trades. I remember doing a little bit of dusting and polishing while I was clerk of the court in Wallingford.
And why do you think you chose that type of work?
It was available. I was able to have it. It would keep me in the law. It kept me working with judges and lawyers and in the court system. It suited my personal life at this time, since I was the mother of 2 young children. I liked the idea that it was 9 to 5. My husband being in politics, we had a very active political life going on, and it was just very suitable to me. I loved, obviously, my association with the law and lawyers and the courts, and it fit right into my life schedule. It was wonderful.
So is it fair to say that most of your career then took the avenue of court administration duties?
Yes.
So did you ever have an opportunity to try a case?
A darling incident, I remember when I was, the courts had merged, and now I was in the circuit court, and Judge David Jacobs was my senior resident judge, and he was a very dear friend. I had known him before we were in the court system together. And one afternoon at 1 o'clock, we had a case scheduled, a criminal case scheduled. It was an indecent exposure. And the prosecuting attorney, and they were part-time at the time, they practiced law in their own law offices, had not shown up. So Judge Jacobs approached me and he said, Jeanette, he said, I'm going to swear you in as temporary acting prosecutor, and you have to try this case. And I said to him, Judge Jacobs, it's just impossible. I can't do that. I have never tried a case in my life, and I just can't. He said, well, look, you have to do this. He said, and there's nothing to be lost. He said, because if you don't do this, he said, I'm going to have to dismiss the case. So I was pressured into taking the assignment. However, I did request that I have a recess because I had to comb my hair and put on my makeup. Which I'm not sure that many of the ladies I see today would even think of, you know, but that was important in those days. So I did do that. I did try the case, and I won that case. I had also at another time tried a stoplight case, and I won that. So for all these years, 50 years that I've been admitted to the bar, I brag that I have a 100% win record in the criminal courts.
And you don't want to try any more cases to attack that record.
Exactly.
Speaking of going to the ladies' room, when you were in law school, were there facilities in the law school if you were the only woman?
That was funny. There were not, because this was a mansion that had been converted to school use. So there were just the bathrooms that had been built into the home. And there were no separate facilities. There were few as there were. There was no special girls' room. I would just keep my eye on the door, and when it appeared clear, I'd run in fast, use it, and get right out again. It worked. Worked.
When you were working, do you remember how much you were paid for your first job as the clerk of the court?
It turned out to be $7,500 a year, but when I accepted the job, I had no idea whether it was either $5,000 or $7,500, and it wasn't until I received my first paycheck that I found out I was lucky enough that it was $7,500 a year. You know, in those years, if you were married to a professional, my working was incidental. My my salary was incidental.
Do you know whether or not you were paid the same as your male classmates?
I suspect that the males who'd been out about the same amount of time were probably making a little more than $7,500 a year in 1960.
But they hadn't taken 2 years off to start their families.
Right.
Were there any other experiences that you recall when you started this first job? I believe, particularly that you told me about approaching your predecessor for some on-the-job training.
In the Wallingford Town Court, and yes, I had approached the former clerk, or the person who was still clerk until my term began, and asked him if I could spend a few days observing what the procedures and duties and responsibilities of the clerk of the court were. And he refused to give me any assistance there at all. I was just turned down flat. But he had, his party had lost the election. He was kind of sore for being out of this little position, and that was how he reacted.
So how long did you stay in this first job?
I believe all of the town courts were abolished in, it was January 1961 that the circuit court came into existence. So I'd been in the Wallingford Town Court for a year and a half. All the town courts were abolished.
A year and a half or 2.5?
A year and a half, 58 to 58 or 59, Helen, to 1961, January 1961. 58, yeah, January 1961. They were abolished, and all those courts became part of the circuit court system. That's such a long time away, Helen, that memory grows dim at this point.
So how did you feel about your daily routine?
I think that question might be directed to when I was first started in the Wallingford Town Court.
Yes.
It was a regular 9 to 5. I ate my lunch at my desk. The court was in the town hall. So it was a great place to be because you were where all the action was and all the politics was going on and a little bit of socializing. It was rather pleasant, pleasant experience.
Do you feel that you had any mentors in your first position?
No, that concept has recent popularity that I see. In my day, it was not as formalized as it is today. I did have people, some judges that I thought were very, very influential and helpful in guiding me. And one I mentioned before, Judge David Jacobs from Meriden, a great person. I miss him an awful lot. He was a fun, exciting, scholarly man. Judge Lexton, Roman Lexton, who then became the chief judge of the Court of Common Pleas and gave me the opportunity to be the supervisor of all of the clerks in the state of Connecticut. He was tremendously helpful. And somebody that was just marvelous to me, Judge Max Riker. I understand.
Who, by the way, just celebrated his 100th birthday a few months ago and is still practicing in New Britain. I believe he's the oldest practicing judge in the country.
At 100, he would have to be. Judge Riker was a wonderful friend to me. He would always try to curb my impulses and my rather free speech
I think he still
at
does
times.
the same thing for me.
Yeah, yes, he has that ability, doesn't he, to sort of tone people down. A very, very special person. I remember his wedding anniversary is my birthday. Because when I worked in the New Britain court, of course, his chambers was upstairs, so that when we would celebrate my birthday, we would bring him down, and his anniversary to his wife was celebrated at the same time.
What were the advantages and disadvantages to being a woman in your position?
Back in that day, because being women lawyers were so rare, I got an awful lot of attention and approbation, and it was just an awful lot of fun. From my point of view, people were very gracious, and I found sometimes very impressed that a woman would be a lawyer. So in that sense, it was rather nice. I don't think in other ways I received a lot of advantages, because people were still leery and wary about having women lawyers in their firms, that women would not feel that they were trustworthy to handle such serious matters. But since I was in a situation that I enjoyed so very, very thoroughly, and had no real interest in changing, I never battled with this discrimination. I think I sort of accepted it because I was happy where I was, and in that sense did not have the ambition to do other things in law, to actually practice or try cases. Perhaps if my personality had been such, I might have encountered that. I had a job I loved, and I had a young, growing family, and I was my life was full. So
was
very different.
The clerks, the supervisory positions that you grew into, was it required to have a law degree to do those jobs?
Well, as supervisor of clerks, yes. And then it depended on what philosophy and which person was in power at the time. Sometimes the judicial department, composed the judicial department, wanted all clerks of the courts to be attorneys, so that when there were vacancies, they would only take applications from either law school graduates or attorneys. There were times when you could be a layperson who could be a clerk of the lower court, whether that was, well, at the circuit court, we did have some lay clerks of courts. There was a mixture, but in the higher courts, I believe the Superior Court always had professional clerks.
So how did you advance in your career?
The reason I advanced, again, because I was very content with where I was and what I was doing. And don't forget, in the first half of my career, I worked because it was fun and I wanted to. Very different from the second half of my career, when I worked because of necessity, in order to feed myself and keep a roof over my head. So how did I advance? I advanced because as the courts merged, town court into circuit court then into common pleas, then into superior, the job became bigger. My responsibilities grew, my staff grew, and I wish I could take more credit for it, other than I guess I wasn't so bad that I ever got fired, and they allowed me to continue. But that's how it happened, Helen. I was there, and the job grew, and hopefully I grew with it. I hope.
I think it's apparent that you did. What was the attitude of other attorneys toward you?
I never had a problem with other. I was not a competitor. I was not a threat in that sense. And I find most lawyers want to be friends with the clerk of the court. It can make life a little easier.
I think when I was in law school, we were told, make friends with the clerk. That's how you find out what to do, rather than with other lawyers.
That's right. And if Charlie Karanian wanted to smoke his cigar in my office, that was all right because I said so. So,
what was the attitude of judges toward you?
Again, I was no threat to the judges, and I was treated very nicely. Some of them became very dear, close friends of mine.
And you've already told us some of the judges
Yes.
that were your particular mentors.
Yeah.
And how did what influence or help did Judge Jacobs and Roman Lexton and Max Riker and these judges that were particularly helpful to you? In what ways were they helpful?
Well, they exposed me to experiences that I had never had for myself. Judge Jacobs was a great scholar. He loved to write, and I would read things that he would, I think my interest in words and reading come a lot from Judge Jacobs. He was kind of fun and exciting to work with. I remember he had gotten an Oxford English dictionary, which I learned was a very impressive thing until I found out that you had to have a magnifying glass in order to read it because he got the 2-volume version, like 100 volumes into 2, and you needed a magnifying glass in order to decipher it. Judge Jacobs, Judge Lexton, of course, who, and Judge Riker, who sort of steered me through the politics of the judicial department and the court system. Judge Lexton, who gave me so many opportunities, the chief clerkship in the New Britain Court, and then the position that I enjoyed the most, supervisor of all the clerks of all the courts in the state of Connecticut for about 2 years.
Would you say that that supervisor job was the position that meant the most to you?
Yeah, yeah.
And why would that be?
I got to work in every court in the state of Connecticut and met all the personnel in all of the courts, which was a great experience if your career is court administration, to see how they're all similar, how they're all different, and how the different philosophies, because the courts are being on a local level run by different people. It's very interesting. We all want to get to the same place, and it's amazing how many ways there are of doing that. I liked it especially because through the supervisor of clerk's office, the legislation which came out of the legislature, anything that impacted the courts, came to me because I had to devise the procedure by which we would apply the laws.
And was there one particular law that you had to implement that you felt
one I remember
was particular
most,
to yourself?
And that the one I spent, the single one that I spent the most time on, the erasure law, which was enacted in those years.
And by erasure, you mean?
Erasure of criminal records for people who had completed their terms which qualified them for the erasure of their criminal record. Mm-hmm. There was quite a bit to it because obviously you had to keep track of somebody who was coming through the system, and then you had to obliterate those records once they were through, so that it was an important factor. I enjoyed taking the legislation and then actually working out the process by which the various clerks would accomplish the erasure of that record.
So, in doing all of this varied tasks as part of your positions, did you either experience or perceive any particular barriers?
Again, Helen, remember, I was graduated from law school, or attended law school, and graduated long before the women's movement, which I peg at about the 70s. I got out in 1956. The women's movement began in the 70s. I had absolutely no, I never went into law because I was wanting to espouse the course of women, or because I wanted to right injustices that were being inflicted upon women. To be honest, I probably was a little bit naive when in the first part of my career.
Well, it just sounds as if your consciousness wasn't raised so that if you had barriers, you accepted them rather, and you weren't really as sensitive or conscious of them.
Until the women's movement came along, and I sort of realized that instinctively and silently I was doing what the women's movement was then sort of solidifying and making tangible. I knew I did not want to be in a subservient position. I didn't want to be secondary to anyone. I knew I wanted to be involved in something that I thought was impressive and meaningful, which I think the law is immensely. I do feel that in 1953, when I began law school, that it was an act of courage to get up every morning and go to school when Shirley and I were the only two women in the law school. And
I certainly think it must have been.
And taking on something like the law rather than, Renaissance art and English literature. I look back now and think that it must have taken that young lady a great deal of courage to get up and go to school every day and do reasonably well. Yeah.
It certainly must have.
Yep.
Let's turn our attention to family issues. Did you marry?
Did I marry? Yes, I married a few times.
And
I compromised with Mr. Archibald.
So you've already told us, but I'll ask you again. When did you marry?
I married at the end of my second year of law school. And I was married to Jack Carrozzella for 20 years, and we have 4 wonderful youngsters, boys, men.
And you met him in law school?
Yes, I
did. That right?
Yes.
So he was also a lawyer.
Yes, Jack was the class ahead of me, yes.
And then
I was the only woman in the class other than Shirley who was spoken for, in a sense. So Jack pursued me, very enthusiastically, and we married at the end of my second year.
And what was his attitude toward your career?
It was okay. I mean, again, I didn't practice law. I was no threat to him professionally.
Well, he also went into the relationship knowing that you were a law student.
That's right.
It's not that you came to it later.
And in those years, because women lawyers were so rare, I think that he and his family were very proud of the fact that he had married a woman lawyer. Yeah, they appreciated me.
Now, later you married Bill Moeller, who was a very prominent lawyer in this area.
Yes.
And you were married for
I was married to Bill for 20 years.
And what was his attitude toward your career?
Bill was one of my biggest fans in all ways. He was wonderful. Bill always stood on my side, even when I would have my troubles with Judge Shaughnessy. In 32 years, the one judge that I did not appreciate. And Bill was always a Jeanette fan. Yeah.
And you've told us that you have 4 sons.
Yes.
And how close were they in time?
I had 4 sons within 4 years. As I mentioned earlier, the women's movement will be proud of me on this. They have to be. I was 6 months pregnant when I passed the bar exam, or took the bar exam. And Jack was in the service. Within a short time, my son Chris was born. When I became clerk of the Wallingford Town Court, I had 2 children. I went to work as a mother of 2 young children. I became pregnant when I was in the Wallingford Town Court and had twins. So at this point, I had 4 sons under 4. Now, when the twins were born, I worked on Wednesday. The twins were born on Thursday. They were born in July. I took my 2-week summer vacation, and I went back to work. This is 1960. Now, at that time, all of us who composed the Wallingford Town Court, the judge, deputy judge, prosecuting attorney, and myself, none of us knew that state statute forbade any woman to work within, I believe it was something like 3 months prior to delivery, nor could you return to work within 3 months of the birth. But I worked till the day the twins were born, took my 2-week summer vacation, and returned to work after that. The inspiration for that was Ethel Sorokin. I was on the board of student editors in my, I think it was the last year of law school.
And,
I think that's,
and that board is...
I think that's the precursor to the law review, because you were selected because of your good grades, and there were just 9 of us. I remember Tom Meskel was the chairman of the board of student editors. He was in my class when I was in law school. I was to meet, I had completed a paper, or she was going to review one of the papers I was writing on the board for the board of student editors, and I got a phone call telling me not to come because Ethel had just had a baby, and my meeting with her was scheduled for 2 weeks hence. So in those days, that made quite an impression. I thought you stayed in the hospital for an awful long time back then.
Week, yeah.
Yeah. So I think years down the line, or wasn't that many years down the line, when I had my children, I guess I figured that's how you do it. I had twins, and I should get back to work. And,
so you obviously had some kind of daycare.
Yeah. In those years, it was nice. You could find some person in town, maybe someone who was widowed, who would be willing to come to work in your household and take care of the children. And I was fortunate enough to have that kind of assistance, so that I was able to, when I went to her to tell her that I was having the twins, this was a surprise, and I asked her if she would stay, and she said okay, and then I didn't know until I was 7 months pregnant that I was having twins. So when I went to her and said, Irene, they're going to be twins, I said, will you stay? And she said to me, I'll try. And she raised those boys.
Do you think that having children affected your career?
No, because I had 2 before I started. I just added 2 after I was there. It didn't. My mother worked. I don't remember my mother being home. From the time I have memory, I don't remember a mother being home. So apparently I didn't feel inherently there were no negatives.
That you were depriving your children.
No. I think it's how you do it that makes the difference. Who you are and how you do it.
And so obviously your work situation didn't change because of pregnancy,
no,
let alone having children. you've told us that one of your children became a lawyer?
Yes.
So that's only 1 out of 4.
Right, right. Orthopedic surgeon, lawyer, and 2 MBAs. If you have them fast, everything gets clustered.
Well, what do you think the impact of your legal career was on your family?
You mean on, say, my children? Or, I don't know. With reference to my children, I never hear them complain, and I think sometimes if you don't know, you don't miss what you've never had. I don't see that they were damaged. If you ask them whether they missed having a mother at home, somebody was there. I don't think.
So that doesn't distinguish a legal career versus some other career. But they had a working mother, and they accepted
Well, the
that.
fact that it was a legal career did not make it better or worse. You're right on that. How did it influence my life? It was tremendous. It was it gave me something that I loved all the time that I devoted to it. The 32 years that I spent working. It enabled me to earn my own living and to take care of myself, which I have always done. I have never received alimony. I have always fended for myself. I have always maintained myself from
So
the
before
day.
and after marriages, you were able to
Before,
sustain
during,
yourself.
and after, I have taken care of myself. And I have been blessed to be able to do it in an area in which I've had a tremendous love for the subject matter and for the work that I've done and the people that I've associated with. I am tremendously happy that my life took that turn. It was wonderful.
Well, I think we should say amen and take a short break, and then we'll continue.
Oh, I was almost going to get on my hands and knees and pray that.
Jeanette, let's turn our attention to bar associations and larger community events. Did you become a member of any bar associations?
I belong to the Meriden, Wallingford, Southington Bar Association and to the New Haven Bar Association. I was involved in those 2 bar associations.
Do you think that any bar activities or involvement affected your career?
No. I would attend the meetings, and it's a nice place to get to know your fellow lawyers and the few other women who are in law. So I attended for those reasons. With a job in my young family of 4, that was as much as I could handle.
Did your employer encourage you to participate in the bar?
They didn't care what you did, as far as that was concerned.
Do you think that the larger historical events, such as the women's movement or other things that were going on throughout the larger society, affected your career?
Not terribly much. I'm sure that with World War II having occurred, the place of women in society was becoming more prominent. So I'm sure that had some impact on what was going on in society, in my head. Other than that, the wars, no, because I was a woman and not in the military. But also, the women's movement had not taken off when I was involved with law school and with the early part of my career. There was no women's movement. I did not go into law because I chose to back this goal, or because I was motivated by it. I appreciated what it did for me and for all women once it came along. But those did not, the women's movement did not impact. I was totally
It sounds
unaware
like the timing of it was such that you had already become a lawyer and already in your career before the second wave of feminism became active.
Yes.
Do you think that there were any major laws or legislation that affected your career?
I'm sure there were, but not the legislation that was passed years later regarding women's rights.
Well, you told us even when there was a law such as related to pregnancy, you weren't aware of it, and just did what you did.
As far as being in the court, so much was passed had nothing to do with women's rights, but things that impacted the court system, which of course then was passed on to me. The responsibilities became so much greater. You know, the Miranda laws and not being able to, you'd have to have a hearing before you could attach. When I started, you initiated the lawsuit with an attachment, and that was forbidden. That put a lot of work on the clerk's offices. Things like that did occur that impacted me, but personally, not too much.
Okay. Let's step back a moment now and reflect on all that you've been telling us and your long career. Starting over, why did you want to be a lawyer?
Because I wanted to be a woman somebody. That's the best answer, the best reason I can give.
And do you think that becoming a lawyer met those expectations?
Yeah, it did to me. It did to me. Back in those days, being a woman lawyer was very impressive to people. It was like being a cat with a brass tail. So that's what I wanted, and that's what I got. Plus, I was doing something that I absolutely was absorbed by.
So what do you think the rewards and the advantages are? Is there anything else other than what you've just mentioned?
Not just the law, but any job would have enabled me to, provide for myself. I just feel I was blessed that I was given that ability by doing something that I enjoyed and just loved so very much.
If you had the chance to live life over, would you become an attorney again?
Yes, I would. I would also take dancing lessons. I would like to be an attorney on Dancing with the Stars.
What advice would you give to a woman entering the legal profession today?
The same advice I would give anybody going into the legal profession. I would like to see them emphasize professionalism. I would like to see them bump up the dignity and the elegance that used to be in the court system when I first remembered it. Other than that, work hard.
And what do you think the impact of your career as a lawyer on your life as a whole has been?
I think very great. I have a love and a reverence for the law. I'm furious that the law is so little understood and lawyers are so greatly maligned in this day and age. The very civilization that we exist in, which I think is great, is because of the law, and I don't think people understand that well enough. I think without it, we would be a pack of hyenas tearing each other apart.
So how do you view the role of lawyers in society today?
Very important. They're the ones who know the principles by which we live and how they should be applied in an orderly fashion. Unfortunately, as I said, I think we malign them, we don't pay enough attention to them, and I think unless we wise up, we will pay the price for that.
And do you think the role of lawyers has changed in the years since you've become a lawyer?
I don't think the role has changed. I just think the way it's practiced has changed. I think it's become too much of a raw business and not enough of a calling. And to me, it is. And I don't like seeing it minimalized and demeaned the way I have seen it happen.
The butt of jokes.
Yes, yes. And I think, of course, the first way you start to counter that is by assuming a professional, dignified, respectful, civilized, civil attitude yourself. And so that you don't give people an opportunity to demean the law. I hate things like advertising in law, things that also, I think, demean the profession and bring it to the ordinary, because it's not and it shouldn't be.
What if anything, do you believe that women attorneys have added to the legal professional system?
Yeah. In my observations, working in the court system 32 years, once women, of course, came in quantity, I thought women were specially suited to the practice of law. Women tend to be more wordy, work with thoughts better. Some of their womanly qualities, I think, when applied, their interest in people and their caring, I think make them very nicely suited to practicing law and dealing with the human elements that go on. I think the law will be feminized. It looks like it's fast doing so. We're getting more lawyers, more women on the bench. And I'm delighted to see that happen. I think women do a great job with practicing law.
Do you think that technology has changed the legal profession, and if so, how?
No question that it has. With the computer doing research and filings in the courts, and with even in my sense, I went into a court where everything was done manually. All the pleadings were recorded manually. Short calendars were typed up and mailed manually into a court that was almost totally computerized. So it's made a tremendous difference in how the court and how people function who are working with the law in the courts.
What accomplishment in your life are you proudest of?
Becoming a woman lawyer. There's nothing that comes close.
And what changes would you like to make to the legal profession or to the practice of law in Connecticut?
As I said, I'd like to see it become more civilized, more elegant. I think sometimes that I see people who are practicing law who probably should not be practicing law. Maybe it's a little too easy to get into law schools. It seems almost anybody can set up a law school and then award degrees and diplomas or whatever. I think they might be a little bit more selective in who is admitted to this very honorable profession. And then I think that various groups should assume the responsibilities, the bar associations, to see that lawyers conduct themselves in a elevating fashion and be what it was and what it's supposed to be.
Well, we've covered a lot of material here. Is there anything else that you think we've left out that would be appropriate to discuss?
I think we've about covered it all, Helen. It's been so great to see you again.
Well,
And
it's been my privilege, and I think it's wonderful that this will now preserve your thoughts for the future.
Nice idea. I think it's a wonderful thing that the foundation is doing, and I thank you very much.
We agree on that.
Yes, yes.